My mom took my posters down, and that's fine, because for some reason there was a police poster up, and I fucking hate Sting. And I want everyone, every time someone sees Sting, to go, "Fuck the police!" into his face. His beautiful, beautiful face that just keeps getting more beautiful. I love Sting so much. Good evening. My name is Tim Ford. Today, let's make it easy. We're going to talk about soundtracks. Top 5 soundtracks that I could find in 5 minutes when I was getting my records. First up, the 2000 release of the soundtrack to Hey Bro, Where Are You? After this, this spawned a million people to start shitty folk bands. And for that, it shouldn't be on this list. But because it is such a well-constructed album of folk, bluegrass, old gospel songs, it deserves to be on the list. If you're one of those folk bands, I apologize. But you suck. Next up is probably a little obvious Oliver, but it's the Shaft soundtrack, Isaac Hayes. Famous for being the first African American to win a non-acting Oscar. Definitely deserves it. It's one of the best soundtracks of all time. My favorite Ike Hayes is Black Moses, but this is a close second. It's the best-selling album on the Stax record label, which is the third best record label of all time. I mean, that's enough facts. That's a lot of facts. It's unbelievable. Oh, don't put the O's in there. Next up is the Crow soundtrack. I was a pretty young child when this came out, but I thought I was totally just like a kick-ass motherfucker when I watched this and listened to the soundtrack, because it's, I mean, you can call it goth, but it's not goth at all. But it's where I first heard The Cure, first heard the Violent Femmes, Helmet, Pantera. Pantera sucks, man, but Jesus Mary Chain. Oh my God, every song in here is good except for half of them. And what? Mama? My mom used to get mad at me because this was a very dark album, and she thought I was going to start wearing lipstick and stuff, which I eventually did at one point, but we don't need to talk about that. I haven't watched this in a lot of years, so it's probably pretty horrible. Next up, Edward Scissorhands. So I watched this about 6 months ago, and it wasn't as good as I remember it being, but the soundtrack was still unbelievable. Anthony Michael Hall, the little nerdy kid from Breakfast Club, is like this like huge beefed up dickhead in it. It's great. He's great. He's underrated, man. Danny Elfman's compositions on this are probably my favorite. I previously talked about it when I bought the Pee-wee's Big Adventure soundtrack. It's hot? Is it hot? It's hot, right? This is probably my favorite of his. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. When she's dancing in the snow, that is made by Edward's Scissors hands. It's a magical moment. And I tend to use the reference at the end of the movie. Winona Ryder is an old lady, and her granddaughter asks, "Why don't you go up and see him?" And she goes, "I'd like to remember him. I'd like him to remember me the way I was, not the way I am." And I think about that. I think about that every time one of my favorite bands gets reunites for a reunion show. Like, I would like to remember the Pixies the way they were, not the way they are. So, to all the bands thinking they want to reunite, watch Edward Scissorhands and listen to Winona like you should anyway. You can edit